So I'm quite excited today because the Industry Connect Club that started as part of the Classroom Initiative has opened up to a wider audience to include you all. So the IPL Industry Connect Club is a platform where we connect with product leaders and arrange for leadership talks, arrange for field trips wherein we gather insights and experiences from leaders themselves. So, as part of the industry connecting initiatives, so we have started off with the leadership talk today. So, the keynote speaker of today's evening needs no introduction. He is a leader, he is a veteran in this product space, and he is site leader for one of the top-notch networking giants. It's called Cisco Systems. So, he is none other than Amit Fadnes. So, Amit Fadnes brings around 25 years in experience into the product verticals. He has been grooming the Cisco Systems right from its baby nascent stages to what it is today in Cisco Bangalore. So I invite Amit Fadnes to grace this occasion and then deliver his insights on strategy of building partner ecosystems in the product industry. So welcome, Amit. We look forward to hear from you.
All right, thank you.
Any Q&A, etc. If you want to address to Amit Fadnes, we have the Twitter handle out there. So you can tweet your messages and it will be communicated during the separate Q&A session out there. So there is an incentive and award for you guys whoever asks a very good question to Amit.
There's a difference between a good question and a tough question, so I'll leave it to you to judge. All right, so good afternoon, folks. I just had lunch and I'm sure that you had too. So, my job is to, keep all of you awake for next 1 hour or so. So look, I sort of put together a topic. Then as I was putting together the slides, I thought I will sort of maybe expand the topic a little bit rather than just talking about the partner ecosystems and try and make this a little more relevant to you, from a product leadership perspective. Okay. I do want to thank the IPL team for sort of putting together this club. I think this is a very good forum. I'm glad to be in a class. Always gives me high energy, right, looking at all of you guys. And I'm glad that your exams are over. So, it sort of gives you and me a little bit more breathing space and not worry about tomorrow's paper, right? So, I hope you did well, those of you attended the exam. Okay, so, the topic was really about building business strategy and, partner ecosystem. And then as I started putting together the slides, I thought, it's becoming a little too specific about partner ecosystem. I mean, I can talk for hours together on the Cisco's sort of partner ecosystem itself. But it would have become a little bit boring for you just listening about partner ecosystem. So I thought, let's just talk about what's happening in the business right now, okay, globally as well as in India, because there are some very exciting things happening in India. And I think there is a huge gap that at least we in industry see even today as far as product development is concerned. And let's sort of talk a little bit about that gap. And I think this, this entire platform, IPL, is very, very key to that gap, to filling or to bridging that gap, okay? All right, so I see some problem with the form factor, but anyway, let's see. See, look, first of all, we are living in an era which is changing very, very fast, and it's actually changing faster than ever before, okay? What we have seen at Cisco is that, if you look at past 100 years or so, okay, starting from telecom revolution and telephony and things like that, all the way to where we are at this point in time, which is Internet of Everything, cloud computing, whatever you call this era to be. There are multiple things happening at this point. I don't know what this era will end up to be known as eventually. But what we have seen continuously is that the pace of innovation and the pace of transformation has consistently increased, right? So when you looked at the telecom evolution, that probably took about 10 to 20 years, somewhere around 15, 17 years, correct? Before that, industrial evolution, almost 100 years. Now we see technologies changing every 6 to 9 months, literally. 6 months, 9 months down the line, you will find that what was the in thing now is sort of a pass, or it's become matured already, and people have started talking about something totally new, right? And the space of innovation is ever increasing. You would have heard about Moore's law, right? All of you have heard Moore's law, right? Speed of computing increases every 18 months, form factor decreases to half every 18 months. You can have multiple interpretations of the law. We have something called Metcalfe's law in networking, which basically says that the amount of data that is carried on the network doubles every 6 months. Okay, and we feel that that's not going to sort of slow down. Now, Moore's law has limits because you can't go to zero, obviously, right? In terms of size or you can't go to infinite processing speed. Data, on the other hand, is going to continue to sort of explode exponentially, and therefore, what's obviously happening is, in terms of architectures, something new has to be done. For example, if data was doubling every 18 months, then the solution would have been easier, correct? You take the latest processor, put it on it, double the clock speed, and you should be able to typically, if everything else is okay, if your operating system is good, if your peripherals are good, then you should be able to handle the data load. But if data doubles 6 months and compute doubles every 18 months, then we have a problem, correct? And that problem has to be then solved by multi-processing, multi-core processors, different types of parallel processing architectures, distributed architectures, and things like that. So systems evolve, okay, very, very rapidly. We also see that what used to do in the core of the network, okay, gets pushed out from speeds and feeds perspective to the edge of the network, and from the edge of the network they get pushed out to the enterprise or to the to the homes. Today we live in an era where 10 gig of speed at home is okay. You won't raise eyebrows if somebody has 10 gig. At least if you can get at least 2 to 4 Mbps, which I think everybody gets now, you won't raise your eyebrows. But there is ACT, and there are some of the service providers who are saying 25 Mbps at home. Some are saying half a gig at home. You have .11 AC as a technology which can give up to 1.3 gig wireless speed at home and things like that. So gig is okay. In enterprise, 10 gig is absolutely a pass, right? At your desktop, if you are getting 10 gig, I think you'll feel good about it, but you won't feel great about it. Now, by the way, 5 years back, there was no 10 gig at the desktop. It was a gig, okay, just about 5 years back. People were talking still about gigabit speeds. And then the distribution was about 10 gig, core was about 40 gig. That's not transition, right? We are talking of 10 gig at the port, we are talking of 40 gig in the aggregation, and somewhere between around 160 gig at the core. Now that's the speed at which data is getting transferred. But the type of data that is getting transferred is also very, very different, right? 2004, 2005 saw the advent of what is called YouTube. Okay, it dramatically changed things around us because it gave an ability to an end user to sort of upload video or download video, and video demands inherently really good response from the network. So there are so many of these things happening, and then there has been a sort of a revolution in the enterprise data center space where a lot of things have got virtualized or getting virtualized, right? So the architectures are evolving there too. So in a nutshell, whether you look at mobility, you look at video, you look at data center, you look at cloud as a technology, security, right? All of these are dramatically changing, and they're changing at a pace which is much faster than what it was 10, 15, 20 years back, right? I started working 25 years back, and we were at that time, and Pamela was here, she's here in the room. We were designing a telephony system, and I still remember that most of the clock speeds were still in 1 megahertz, right? 1 megahertz was what we were, and we used to think that, wow, that's really supersonic, correct? Now if you design a car with 1 megahertz clock speed, it will be like, people will be looking at you as if there's something wrong with this, right? Sensors are operating at much, much higher speed. So anyway, if you really look at this, there are lots of transitions happening, but you can categorize these transitions into 3 buckets: technology, economics, and economics is very important as you look at IPL, and the courses that you're doing. Consumption models are changing dramatically, right? How does an end user or enterprise or a service provider actually consume technology is changing very, very dramatically, and there's a lot of innovation that's happening in that space. Then market transitions, right, as well as technology transitions. So these are all the transitions that are happening around you, and I think if you want to be a successful product leader, you have to stay on top of these transitions, and you have to be one step ahead, okay? Because following the transition will not make you a leader. Following the transition will ensure that you survive, correct, today. If you really want to be a leader in the industry, then you have to see beyond this as to what's really happening and be able to predict it and be able to come out with requirements which can then be realized through a product, right? And that's a challenge that all of us have as leaders, right? That we have to stay not only up to speed with what's happening right now, but we have to be able to foresee or predict what's going to happen in future. By the way, this is volatile and companies don't survive this. Just look at the statistics. Only 24% of the companies which were Fortune 500 companies 25 years back have actually survived. So these companies were Fortune 500 companies in their era at some point in time. Only about 25% of them actually survived. Okay? 87% of the companies go into a severe stall. Okay, there are different levels at which companies stall. $1 billion is a place where companies stall typically. If you cross that, then about $4 to $5 billion, companies stall again. $10 billion, companies stall. $25 billion. You see a lot of companies, right, stalling at that number and then never recovering from it. Okay? So 87% of the companies stall. Only 11% of the companies actually recover. So the success is not that rampant. Size doesn't really matter. You've seen a number of companies which have been very, very big in their era, who have taken very little time to actually go down. They survived 90 years and the next 10 years they're like nowhere, right? They get broken up, they get splintered into a large number of divisions, the divisions get sold out, and then really no entity exists, right? Which existed even 5-7 years before that. So, so the moral of this story is that, look, irrespective of how successful you are today, it does not guarantee success in future. Absolutely not. Unless you are really keeping pace with what's happening, are you on your toes, and not just that, but are ahead of the curve. Only those companies which are ahead of the curve, ahead of their current times, will be able to make it. And I think this fundamentally is the job of a product leader. I'm not talking of a product manager, I'm not talking about a technology manager, right? I'm talking of a product leader. Okay? A product leader, you may have teams, you may not have teams, you may be leading large divisions, that's different. But if you're leading products, okay, your ability to foresee what's happening around you and then predict is very, very important. Okay? Almost have to be paranoid, right? And healthy paranoia is very good, for both you as well as for the organization, right? If you are to survive. The last thing is the size doesn't really matter. Okay? You've seen time and again that the markets reward fairly small companies which are doing the right thing. And the markets actually punish very, very large organizations which they feel aren't really on the right track. You look at the stock markets and if you look at the multiples, there are companies, which are big, which are not getting really the multiples that, their revenues demand. There are companies which are very small. There are, $100 million companies who are outperforming companies which are $100 billion at this point in time, right? In terms of stock market performance. So, your size doesn't really matter, but what matters is, do you exhibit a confidence that you are in for a long haul, and that in the space that you are operating in, your chances of success are very, very high, correct? And you are a growth story. I mean, these are some of the things that, the street sort of rewards. Not that the street is always right, by the way, right? I'm not suggesting that the street is always right, but, that's one of the parameters by which you judge corporate performance, and therefore that's important too, right? So look, and this is a Gartner report, so there's nothing new in this. And I've taken it from 2013 because I didn't, actually we saw the 2014 is almost the same, okay? So Gartner actually went around the industry talking to a number of business leaders to understand, what their business challenges are. And obviously it's interesting from a perspective because a lot of the, industry leaders they talk to were IT leaders, right? So, from that standpoint, it was an important report. But, there is a common theme that you will see in this, right? So, top 5 priorities, almost irrespective of the business you are in. You may be in retail, you may be in healthcare, you may be in manufacturing, you may be in some other, you may be in cement, infrastructure, oil and gas. Irrespective of the business that you are in, there are 2 things that are happening. One, the OPEX are getting cut dramatically. At the same time, the growth expectations are high. Okay? There is hardly any business which can claim today that, I don't have an OPEX problem. Okay? I'll get whatever I want. It doesn't really happen. And in fact, the more mature you become in your business, the rapid your OPEX decline will be, because the companies want to optimize consistently. So the OPEX are going down, but the expectation from the business is rising dramatically. And this, this dichotomy can be solved only if you apply technology intelligently, right? Because if you keep doing the things the way you are doing before, you will not get the optimization. There is only so much that you can do by training people, okay? People become good at their jobs. 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year in the job, you will see maximum gains in terms of productivity. But then it will plateau and it will not give you, further sort of optimization from an OPEX perspective. You can't keep cutting travel. You can't keep cutting your marketing dollars, right? Because there are some, business necessities that every business has. So at some point in time, you have to start doing things very, very differently, right? You have to start applying technology. So essentially, decreasing OPEX, increasing expectations, okay? And the rate of change of the industry is dramatic, as I said earlier, right? I mean, not just in IT, by the way. Every other business, the rate of change is very, very dramatic. So how do you compete? How do you become more productive? How do you effectively evolve yourself and your ecosystem, okay? And create new business models. Last one is very interesting, okay? What you will see as product leaders is, there are a number of companies who actually do a fairly good job of managing market transitions and technology transitions, okay? But there are a number of companies who do the first 2 things very well, actually falter on business model transitions, okay, big time, and do not necessarily do well. In fact, the business model transitions are disruptors to technology as well as to market transitions too, okay. Let's take some examples, right? I mean, right now, if you really look at it, I would say Amazon has been disrupting business models, okay. Look at what they're trying to do on the compute side. All of us, right? Cisco, HP, IBM, we need to sort of watch this very, very carefully, because, essentially what's happening now is we're saying, look, enterprises don't necessarily need to invest in CapEx and have their own infrastructure in the data center. And you can actually virtualize the data center and offer it as a subscription service, correct? Now, what's running in the Amazon data center is not dramatically different compared to what was actually physically running in the enterprise, correct? So it's not a technology transition. It's not a market transition too. It's not that instead of demanding compute, you're demanding something else, right? Companies still need compute infrastructure. They need memory, they need storage, right? So it is not a market transition. It is not a technology transition. But fundamentally, it is a business model transition. The way I used to run my business if I'm a 50 or 100 people company, I will sort of dimension what my compute needs are, and I will go to one of the server vendors and I will actually go buy a server and put it in the data center and cater to the business. Now no longer so, right? A lot of businesses have an option of calling up Amazon and saying that, look, I need so much of compute or so much of storage on demand, right? And it gives me that elasticity that as my business grows, one phone call or one web page access away, I can expand or contract that compute or memory or storage needs at my bill. And I pay per use, correct? It's almost like the telephone tariff, correct? We have been used to pay per use in telephony, in PSTN, or on mobile phones. But something similar is happening on the compute side. It's a very good example of business model transition, okay? We are now talking of network function virtualization, in almost all the networking companies. Network function virtualization will do, to the networking industry what Amazon did to the compute industry, right? Overall, from a virtualization perspective. And the reason for that is very simple. A lot of our customers are saying, look, I am in textile business, okay? You're asking me to buy networking gear, which is very, very complex, for which I need to recruit people or I need to give out a contract to one of the managed service providers, which is a skilled, sort of workforce. And I'm taking an OPEX as well as a CAPEX, not only to buy the network, but to actually manage the network, right? Can you rather, sort of give us business outcome, okay? Here are my networking needs, here is the size of my business, and I'm willing to pay you as I go, okay? But can you actually bill me just on usage? And can you, by the way, take care of this entire infrastructure and run it for me, correct? It's not a technology transition. We are not going to design a new switch or a new router or a new wireless device. It's actually going to be a business model transition that needs to happen. By the way, business model transitions are extremely difficult to manage for an organization because the back-end infrastructure through which the business actually executes, correct, has to change dramatically to cater to business model transitions. That's one. The second thing is the requirements, the way they come from the field are very, very different. That needs to be managed differently. The sales has to be managed, the sales force has to be completely retrained. And in fact, what we have seen is that in many cases, the sales force just does not work out. The traditional sales force, which has been doing box sales, cannot really sell, okay, in a virtualized environment that effectively, or cannot sell software. IBM is a very good example of this. When they made the transition from hardware to services, they had to almost revamp a very large percentage of their sales force because the model was very, very different. And what do you actually sell to the customer is very different, right? So, the rate of change is dramatic and the business model transitions are difficult to handle. And as a product leader, you have to be very cognizant about what's happening, not just from a market or technology perspective, but what's really happening in your ecosystem, as well as what's happening from a business model standpoint, right? And then see what you need to do. Now let's sort of shift gears, right? I think, having said this, the opportunities are large. The tremendous opportunities. They're just, different. Okay, we have to do different things. I just pulled out the top 10 priorities that Modi government just put out, okay? And by the way, each one of these are multi-$10 billion opportunities. Here in India, right here, right around you, okay? None of these line items are less than $10 billion. Let me put it that way. 100 smart cities will be anywhere between 10 to $50 billion at least, okay? Digitization of economy, electronic manufacturing, okay? Huge opportunity if India can become competitive in terms of manufacturing. And by the way, we are not going to become competitive in terms of manufacturing by chasing China or by chasing Taiwan and try to do or replicate what they have done here in India, because we'll be 10 years late. We'll be at least 10 years late. So we'll have to leapfrog in terms of manufacturing technology. And the best way to leapfrog is to apply technology for manufacturing technology. That's where the Internet of Things, the industrial, GE calls it industrial internet, okay, or Internet of Everything comes in handy, because these type of things can actually let you leapfrog. Cyber security, extremely large. You might have read the article by Ravi Venkatesan today in the Times of India on the cyber security gap that we have in the country. It's pathetic. It's just pathetic, right? We are really not secured in any way, right? As far as security is, cyber security is concerned. The number of attacks are just mind-boggling, okay? And there are attacks on some absolutely critical nuclear infrastructure, okay, government infrastructures and things like that, right? And forget about the enterprises. I mean, the enterprises are obviously taking the brunt of many of these attacks. It's a huge, huge market, but needs out-of-box thinking. If you're going to apply Internet of Things or Internet of Everything and sensor technologies and have millions of sensors, this problem is going to, replicate itself maybe hundreds or thousands of times more, right? So the opportunities there are tremendous, right? Defense modernization, correct? Again, at least a $10 billion, if not, by the way, after boasting about large number of software engineers that the country has and all that, we've still taken 15-20 years to build the first LCA, the Light Combat Aircraft. And it's still, it's just flying, but I don't know whether it is really war ready right now, okay? And that's not a good sign as a country, right? Look, the product ecosystem doesn't show itself off very well if you cannot really make, some of these technologies like, ISRO, which has been very, very successful, or DRDO in the missile technology, or, Air Force or avionics are sort of torch bearers in terms of pushing the technology to the limits. If you can succeed in those spaces, you'll also see a large number of other areas across the board. But the reality is that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done. Say a lot of these, right, by the way, every one of these is a $10 billion opportunity. So as product leaders, by the way, our challenge is, how do you capitalize on this? By the way, you don't have to look at 3 or 4 of them. You have to look at any one of them. And any one of them is at least a $10 billion opportunity in next 5 years or 5 to 10 years, correct? So you can pretty much build a successful business against any of these line items, provided your thought process is right, provided you can get the right ecosystem in place and really deliver to the market what the market demands, okay? The reason why I put this up is that we don't have to look far. We don't have to go to Europe and US to try and sell what we build. We need to just look around and see how much opportunity exists everywhere, pick the right areas and be able to deliver to those areas, right? The problem has been, these by the way have been around, okay? Yeah, the government is giving a new impetus and therefore there is a lot of, positive sentiment around it. All of this is true. But the reality is that these opportunities have existed. I don't think we as a country, from a product leadership perspective, have actually delivered to any one of this, right? That's one of the reasons why none of the products made out of India have hit $1 billion yet, correct? We haven't really successfully created $1 billion product out of, there are instances of products doing well globally, and those might have, touched $1 billion already. But it's debatable whether the entire conceptualization of that product really happened out of the country, okay? And I think this is where, our biggest challenges are. Now, Internet of Everything, by the way, is a $14 trillion opportunity according to our estimate. $14 trillion, okay? We don't have to worry, about the number, right? If you can become successful, at least multiple of our generations can be very easily taken care of, okay? In India, that opportunity is at least $500 billion, minimum, correct? Enterprise is about $400 billion, public sector is another $116, $120 billion. And you can see, a number of areas there, right? You can see connected marketing, smart factories, okay? Connected gaming and entertainment, innovative payments and the whole sort of payment cycles, right? Next generation workplace, this is what this is, future of work, next generation workplace or future of work. You won't believe it, it's a tremendous opportunity, correct? If you can create virtualized workspaces which are as effective as going to, imagine not having to travel on the Bangalore roads, between 8 and 9:30 in the morning, okay? If you can use that time a little more productively, It will be really, really, I mean, think about it, right? We have 11,200 engineers in our facility, okay? On an average, every engineer spends 1 hour coming to the office and 1 hour going back home, on an average, right? So you're losing 23,000 work hours a day, every single day. Apart from people getting tired, frustrated, okay, by the time they come to the office or they go back home, right? Can that time be more effectively utilized? What have we done so far? I mean, I think the only productive thing that you can do in the car is right now, be able to take a phone call if you are not driving, okay? Or maybe do some some calls between your office and home and back, right? But we haven't really improvised more than that, right? People are not really able to seamlessly work, okay, in those 2 hours at all. But this is not just that, right? The work environment at home can dramatically improve, by the way, okay, through video technologies and through internet technologies and things like that. We haven't really done that so far. So that itself is a very big thing. And then, you can look at any of these line items and it will tell you that there are tremendous opportunities there, right? So, if you, this slide is more from a Cisco perspective, but if you really look at different verticals, okay, and if you try to distill down what does that really mean, what are the businesses really asking for, this is what it actually gets in. The first and foremost is all about operational efficiency and simplicity, okay. There's a tremendous amount of investment that is going to go in just making sure that businesses operate efficiently, okay, and then there is operational efficiency. You won't believe, but today about 90% of our SMB business still works on spreadsheets, okay, or even worse, manual. Most of the SMBs today, all their log keeping is manual. It's error prone, it's inefficient, right? There are no products out there which actually, will dramatically change their operational efficiencies. Most of the factories in India are still working on age-old equipment, which are not, the process is not completely automated. The machines are literally driven manually in most of the cases by, workforce, correct? The assembly lines are not completely automated. Somebody does something on a particular station and, then at the most a conveyor belt takes that particular work item to the next station where something else happens manually. And then to the next station where something else happens manually, right? But it's not a completely automated workforce. And by the way, if in that assembly line, if there is a particular machine that's operating at 75% efficiency rather than 100% efficiency, okay, most of the shop floor managers will not know it for months, okay, and by the way can't take corrective action on it because they don't know why exactly that machine is performing at a lower optimal efficiency than what it should, correct? Internet of Everything or things, sensor technology, classic example of what you can do to leapfrog this. Because essentially what you need is a deep visibility into processes and into machines about what's exactly going on, your ability to analyze it, and your ability to take corrective actions, okay? And it's very, very surprising that about 75 to 80% of the business that operates in the manufacturing space today is at a really low end of efficiency by world standards. Nowhere near. Tremendous opportunities again. The problem is the automation expenses for manufacturing sectors, if you are going to import technology from US or Europe, are prohibitively expensive. Most of the business folks are not willing to invest, right? And that's where indigenization, local products, innovation becomes so important that if you can bring the right feature functionality at the right price point, you can not only be very, very successful from a business standpoint, but you will also leapfrog the entire industry with you, right? So, operational efficiency, technology consumption models, as I said earlier, the way technology is consumed is going to be very, very different. Application centricity, right? Everywhere, whether it is compute, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is business efficiencies, whether it is corporate governance, whether it is security. A lot of this is going to be very, very application centric, and your ability to define what that application is at the right time is going to define whether you're going to be successful as a leader. So look, if you want to be, if you want to sustain yourself and differentiate in the marketplace, there are some things that you have to do. Most of the successful companies, by the way, catch technology transitions very early. Okay? There are groups in every successful organization. You can look around, you talk to HP, you talk to IBM, you talk to Cisco, to GE, to any other company. Companies have an inherent ability to sort of catch market transitions. Some do well on a transition and therefore succeed. Some sort of lag behind a little bit and struggle until the next transition comes along, and then you sort of latch on to the next transition and become very successful with it. Okay? And if you lose 2 or 3 transitions in a row, you will be wiped out, right? But typically most successful companies who have succeeded over decades have caught technology transitions well. Okay? Architectures become very, very important, especially when the consumption models change. Obviously, you have to be very focused, on customers. And by the way, one of the things that is changing as far as customers are concerned with respect to technology, right, is that customers are not willing to buy technology and then think about how I can use this particular technology to better my business, right? A lot of conversations that we are having in the field today, the customers are basically saying, drive a business outcome for me. If I'm a retail shop owner, traditionally 10 years back, Cisco would have sold to the IT department in retail. And Cisco won't worry too much about how that technology is actually used by retail. No longer so, correct? A lot of conversations that we are having with the retail is with the shop owner, right? And the conversation that is happening with the shop owner is, well, I'm not interested in the switch or the router or the wireless device. Tell me, how can I increase the footfall in my shop by 30%? Okay? And tell me how can I, increase the revenue per footfall by another 30%? And can you own this business outcome? And if my footfalls increase by 30% and the revenues increase by 30%, I'm willing to pay you 5% of that. Correct? That's a different consumption model. Now you're not talking about saying, okay, here is a switch for $5,000 or a router for $25,000. Go buy it and it will sort of connect up your retail store. That's not a conversation we're having. The conversation you're having is, look, my business is about $10 million a month. Okay? I don't understand the technology that you're talking about. I'm not interested in buying it. If you feel your technology is, if you feel confident that your technology can make a difference to my business, let's own it together. Okay? Let's take this business from $10 million to $13 million. I'm willing to pay you $1 million. That's the conversation that's happening. Correct? So it's not about technology. It's about the business outcome. And it's about the application. We're not talking wireless and selling wireless to retail. We're talking about how do you engage customers who walk into a retail store, okay, predominantly carrying a smartphone. Correct? The fact that everybody is carrying a smartphone, can I leverage that, okay, more effectively to engage with the customer much more effectively, right? To drive promos, to drive sales, okay, to drive advertisements on the cell phone. That's the conversation that's going on. It's not about wireless. Wireless has to be there. It's a given. People are not paying for wireless anymore. They will not pay for wireless anymore. They'll pay for, let's say that if you put together through the ISV ecosystem, application which engages a customer as he walks in and gives targeted advertisements depending on where that customer is. Then you have a story. Then the ISV has a story. Now you are actually approaching the retail customer and saying, here is an ISV which has built an application on my infrastructure. We are willing to come to you and we are willing to sort of do advertising for you online. Correct? There's a business model for the ISV, there is a business model for the infrastructure company, and there is a business outcome for the business who is buying that solution. Correct? So the conversation is about customer outcomes or business outcomes a lot. And whenever you talk about a business outcome, you will realize that one technology or one company will never really be able to deliver the business outcome in a totality. That's where you really need an ISV ecosystem. That's where you need a partner ecosystem, right? Because people have different strengths. We are an infrastructure company. We are not application developers, right? Cisco is not an application developer. You don't think Cisco is an application development company, do you? We don't, correct? So we have to work with literally thousands of application vendors across the globe to try and see how we can deliver a business outcome to our customer. and that needs an application. That needs an application to be tied very closely to the networking or the compute infrastructure. That's where the innovation is happening, correct? The consumption model is through cloud, so that needs cloudification of this application, and it needs cloudification of my infrastructure, and that's why I'm going to do it, okay? So you have to build these ecosystems as product leaders around you to actually be able to deliver a business outcome at the end of the day, not a technology piece, not a technology marvel. See, there is a subtle difference that's happening now with respect to maybe 10 years back. This job was predominantly that of the IT team. The IT team is to buy technology and then go to the business internally and say, oh, you know what, I can make this happen. I will buy software, I will buy hardware, I will do this, I will do that, I will sort of pull all of this together, and then maybe I will pull in a partner who can sort of glue these different pieces together to deliver a business outcome for you, correct? Now that model is changing because the customers are saying, hey Cisco, are you the principal? Can you own my business outcome? Can you front end the deal for me, right? I don't care. I don't want to take the cost of talking to 20 different companies and trying to put this solution together, okay? You front end it, create your ecosystem, run the network, run the compute, deliver a business outcome, right? As a product leader, this is an extremely important thing for us to sort of understand, right? That the conversations are going to be very, very different going forward compared to what it was before. Before you could design a sensor, go sell the sensor to the IT team. It's the IT team's headache as to how they actually, you can sort of talk to them, marketing and all of that as to what's the use of the sensor. But fundamentally it's the IT team's headache to actually put together that sensor in their business environment. No longer. Okay, you will have to create the ecosystem yourself. Okay. Now, how do you actually do this? You do it by innovating, by acquiring, by creating ecosystems, right? I will give you Cisco's example. We are about a $48 billion, maybe a $50 billion roughly company. We invest about $5.5 billion every year in R&D, right? Which is approximately 10%, 10 to 11%. It's a huge number, by the way. Now, if you look at the companies across the landscape, you will find that the percentage is very, very high, okay, in terms of dollars invested on innovation. A lot of companies say that Cisco is acquisition and sales because we acquire a lot of companies too. But the reality is that we actually spend a lot of money on internal innovation. And in fact, a lot of that money also goes in integrating technologies that you acquire, okay, and technologies that you build, as well as technologies that you have had in your portfolio for a long period of time. And this is especially true when you have a very large portfolio, right? Today we are in collaboration technologies, we are in server market, we are in access switching, we are in access routing, we are in distribution, we are in core routing, right? So every aspect of the business, we are in wireless as a technology, we have endpoints like Cisco IP phones, we have some tablets, all sorts of things for businesses, correct? So product portfolio is very, very large. If you acquire a new security company, integrating that company and the technology across the product portfolio is not a trivial job, right? And that's where a lot of the dollars also get spent. So $5.5 billion, okay. Market position, we are very, very clear. Every segment that we play in, we are either number one or number two, okay. I think so is GE, so maybe HP in most of the cases, right? But most successful companies have to be number one or number two in their particular market space, okay. Otherwise you won't survive. Third, fourth, fifth, you can't sustain the position in the marketplace, right? It's okay, you can get some revenues, you can sustain for a few years, but long-term sustainability is, big question mark if you are not the best in the industry. So you have to be number one or number two. Large number of patents, okay. You bought over 150 companies so far, small and large. The largest ones are $7 to $10 billion acquisitions. The smallest ones are maybe $20 million acquisitions, right? Or even $10 million acquisitions. But about 150 companies. More and more we are buying application companies, cloud infrastructure companies, video technologies. We have bought nothing in networking over the last 3-4 years. We bought no technology company in the networking space. We have bought in security, we have bought in mobility, we have bought in compute, we have bought in video, we have bought in virtualization, and we have bought in cloud. These are the areas that we have bought. Just to show you where the landscape is sort of moving over a period of time, right? And then, you know, what this number indicates to you is the ecosystem that we have created, okay? See, look, it's a technology that can't be easily deployed. We need a lot of ISVs, we need partners, we need trained workforce in the partners, both from an application as well as from an infrastructure perspective. And we created this certification, which is called Cisco Certified Internet Engineer, which is the top level certification in the industry. By the way, 1 in 100 people get it. 100 people who apply for the certification, 1 person gets it. That's the ratio. So we made it really, really tough. And it's a benchmark certification. If you have CCI, you don't have to give your credentials anymore, right? If you have CCI in security, you are established sort of a leader from a security perspective. If you have CCI in routing, the moment you say you are CCI, the market sort of recognizes you that, okay, fine, okay, you must be something in routing. No more discussion is required, okay? Now the reason this is so important, this actually is nothing but an ecosystem that you create. You have to create a huge, you know, ecosystem around your products and technologies for that to be effectively delivered to the marketplace, to the customers, right? That's where the importance of the ecosystem comes in. More than 70,000 partners. And by the way, I'm counting only the sort of large ones, okay? If I count all the partners that we have, that number is more than 250,000 partners. Okay, but more than 70,000 partners. Now realize that every partner that you have, you need to invest. You need to train that partner. You need to sort of discuss business with that partner. You need to design go-to-market strategies. Okay, if you're an application partner or an ISV, you need to sit down with that partner and talk about what are the, you know, business outcomes that you can together deliver. Why would you two be better, or 3 of you would be better than the competition that exists in the marketplace, right? So it's a huge investment, by the way, this 70,000 partners. And then about 13,000 patents issued. I'm sure that if you compare the IBM number, it looks small. Now maybe IBM has 100,000, Pamela, I don't know, more than that. But it's an asset, by the way. It's not just the patent from US Patent Office, right? Every patent is a technology asset, okay, that you can leverage in many ways, including legal ways, you know, that companies have done to sort of make money. Dilbert, for you to see, innovation, okay? So this guy is telling his manager that, oh, you know, you're going to innovate. That means, you know, all good things are going to happen to me now, right? Work from home, lot of flexibility, lot of freebies, you know, great place to work for, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously the manager says, oh, wow, you know, but can we innovate without any of these things around us? Okay. Can there be some innovation without this? I already sort of talked about this, so let me, totally 28,000 engineers across the globe, about 9,000 here in Bangalore out of those. So about 30% of the total engineering is in Bangalore right now. And then 170 labs across the world. Now, what we are also finding is that applying technologies for operational efficiencies is very important. Okay? We have products which get developed by 6 centers across the globe. If you don't apply technology, you can imagine what will happen in terms of communication overhead, right? But, you know, if you go to Cisco center here in the evening, we have about 20 telepresence rooms, okay? And almost from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., you will not get a telepresence room ever, because teams are, you know, using them highly, right, in terms of interactions, okay? But it's not just about telepresence, right? It's about collaboration. It's about, you know, WebEx. It's about, you know, using video effectively. It's about being able to do distributed development, you know, on the same product, right, efficiently. So a lot of technology being, you know, sort of used there. 87% of Fortune 500 companies are Cisco customers. Okay, about 100,000 customers globally. Okay, obviously a number 1 networking brand, 14th most valuable brand in the world. Okay, and then number 1 in all these areas, correct, that I have shown down. The rest of the areas are number 2. Otherwise, we have exited the business. Wherever we were not one or not two, we have exited those businesses. And we do that very, very proactively every single year. Alright. So look, how do these companies, right? Whether it is, I'm sure, this is true with GE, this is true with HP, with IBM, with all of the companies, TI. How do they do this? Right? First of all, there is no substitute for deep understanding of technologies and businesses. Right? If you want to succeed, if you want to be the number one in the world, your understanding of that particular technology has to be, or product, or that segment, or the business model has to be better than anybody else in the world. Because if you don't, you will get cannibalized. Be rest assured, because the other competitors are very, very smart too. You are not working in an area where you are so far ahead, right, that even if you sleep at the wheels, nobody is going to catch up with you for the next 5 years. That's not going to happen. Okay, you blink and you know that somebody else has taken over the market share. Okay. Now this is very important for product leader. You need to identify your segment. And one thing is for sure, whichever segment it may be, okay, doesn't really matter. You may be in the cement industry, doesn't matter. Okay. In that segment, you need to be the most knowledgeable person or the company, correct, in terms of technology, market, as well as business models, for you to sustain that number one, number two, sort of tag across the globe. If you are not, 3 years from now, you will not be the number one, correct? People would have caught up. If there is business to be made, if there are dollars to be made, and if there are profits to be made, be rest assured that you are not the only one who is seeing that opportunity. There are at least 25 other people who are seeing the same opportunity, right? And they are going to overtake you because they will do things that you are not doing at this point in time. So deep technical knowledge and knowledge across categories.
Now see this is about the ecosystem, right? There are 11,000 service provisions. So when you are looking from a product segment standpoint, one of the things that you need to think about as a product leader is, what is the ecosystem that I'm working with? Okay? You may be a small startup, you may be working on a product idea. That's fine. The product idea may be a killer. It's a killer application. But can you do it alone? You'll probably never be able to do it alone. Right? So the first thing that you need to think about is, okay, I'm actually satisfying a need in the market. Okay, I have a great business case in hand. I have a super technology in hand. I have some great people to work on that particular product. Having said all of that, what is the ecosystem that is going to make this successful? Who are the partners? Who are the ISVs? What's my go-to-market engine? What is the business model? And what is the consumption model? How is my technology going to get consumed? Correct? Because if you don't think through these, you may end up with a great product which is not successful. There are umpteen examples in the industry where there has been nothing wrong with the product. It was an absolutely top-notch, top-quality product, but did not succeed. Why? Because ecosystem failed. You did not set up the ecosystem properly. There are car companies which have great products which fail because they don't have the service center setups, or they don't have the dealer networks set up properly. Correct? In one country they are extremely successful, in another country they fail. The reason for that is very simple, right? The ecosystem has not been built. So as a product leader, and by the way, this is one of the areas where India has failed miserably. Because what has happened is, all the product initiatives, right, have been in isolation. Correct? It's not that we have not built successful products, we have built successful products. But we have not been able to scale and make them into $1 billion, $2 billion opportunity or $10 billion opportunities, right? Why? Because we are not good at working with others and ecosystems. We like to do it on our own, isn't it? Talk to an engineer in Cisco. He would like to code everything on his own. Seriously. The best job is when I can sort of design it myself. Why? When I passed out, long time back, okay, in 1990, the coolest job that was available on the market is to work on Unix internals, Linux didn't exist. Everybody, every Tom, Dick and Harry wanted to work in Unix internals. How many people in India wrote Unix by the way? Nobody did. Who created Unix? A few people created Unix. right? We got a huge amount of kick out of working on Unix internals, right? But at least I didn't get kicked about, oh, let me create a product and a huge ecosystem to go make it successful in the market, right? And it requires a totally different mindset, right? And this is where I think the country has to make a lot of transition. This is where this initiative about product leadership is so important, right? It is not about technology. It is not about can you make the coolest product. By the way, you can buy the technology, it doesn't matter. Go to Taiwan, okay? You'll practically be able to buy anything that you want as a building block. Okay? You don't have to develop. You need not have an engineering team. You need an engineering team to put this together, but not to create technology from scratch. Correct? It's a misnomer, right? People sort of completely think wrongly in this way. You get something that's off the shelf. What you need is an ecosystem which will be able to solve a problem out of that building block. Correct? What is the business problem that you're solving? Is it a real pain point? And do you really have a solution in hand that solves that pain point? And people will buy the solution. They will not ask you where you built it, where you created it. Correct? Then the second phase of product development is to scale and optimize. Correct? Let's say that you clutch together a solution. You took 5 different components from the 5 different parts of the world. You took software from another, ISV. You put this together, went to a customer, really delivered a business outcome. Okay? You might not be very profitable to begin with. Now your job as a product leader is to say, okay, fine, I've tested this concept. I think I'm solving a real problem. Okay? Can I cut costs? Can I improve margins dramatically? And can I scale my business 100-fold or 1,000-fold? Right? And that's where engineering optimization comes into play. That's where you say, oh, I built this particular product using FPGAs, now can I do ASICs? Otherwise, the first reaction people have is, okay, let me build an ASIC. You spend $20 million building an ASIC without knowing what problem it actually solves, right? And this is where we have faltered, frankly. I mean, I'll maybe let Pinkesh comment on this. He was a product manager himself, but what he's seen, or maybe Pamela, right, here, or Pradeep, GE. But tell me, where do you think this country fails? And my assessment is that we fail because we don't necessarily bring the whole solution to the table which really solves a problem. We bring bits and pieces of technology, right? We don't create ecosystems. It doesn't really happen. Okay? I talked about acquisition already, but acquisition is a tool. It can become a part of your strategy. At the end of the day, it isn't a tool. And it's a strategy because there are things that you do or you don't do strategically. In many cases, we've actually waited. We knew that there are 3 possibilities in this particular technology space. Okay? And it is not prudent for Cisco to invest in any one of those areas right now. Let the ecosystem evolve. There are bound to be startups, right, which will do a phenomenally good job. Let's wait and watch as to where the technology moves and then acquire at the right time. It's an important piece of strategy, correct? Not everything can be built in-house, right? You need to acquire what's available in the market and be able to put that together as a part of the solution. But if you really look at, from this point onwards, and you see, this is also, by the way, security and can be clubbed as networking. But look at these. They're all application-centric. There's nothing networking here. Show me one networking company, right? There. Some applications that we're buying, right, on the network. Be it in collaboration, in data center virtualization, or in the video space. Same is true with mobility too, more and more. And the virtualization aspects. Okay? I talked enough about the partner ecosystem, right? It's very important. But you need to invest a lot. I mean, there are large teams in Cisco which are really focused on partner enablement. There are 2 types of partners you get, right, or maybe 3. You have system integrated partners, okay? You have ISVs and you have VARs. VARs are value-added resellers. So they take your technology and they sort of add value on top of it and they sell. ISVs are application ecosystem that actually builds application on top of your infrastructure. You may decide to front-end the deal or the partner may decide to front-end the lead. Your go-to-market is a different vehicle. Okay? And then your system integrators who basically are able to take multiple solutions and put it together as a single solution for the market, right? again,